Today I'm with the first pick. Got my guy Kyle Long because we're talking offensive line. Kyle, this is the first time we obviously worked together. We just met a few minutes ago. I feel like I've known you my entire life, and I cannot wait to talk to you about offensive line because that is your forte, former first-round pick, and played in the league. You were with the Chiefs. When you ended your career, thank you for taking an opportunity. Thank you for coming into the studio to do a little offensive line.
I'm just happy anybody wants to hang out with me. I come in and we get 2 microphones and some comfy chairs, get to talk about God's position, the offensive line. So here we go. Let's have a day, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I'm excited to hang out with you for a lot of reasons. One, because I spent the last month pretty much with Pete Prisco. So anything
great guy.
Well, that's debatable.
It's great to have around.
He's great to have around
in the gang.
He brings excitement wherever he goes. But we're going to talk about some O-line today. And last year, 9 guys went in the first round, offensive linemen. 9 guys aren't going to go this year. But there are a lot of good players, and I think one of the things we sort of get caught up in at times is comparing previous draft classes, and that's fine. But I just want to get your overall thoughts when you're watching these offensive linemen. What are some of the first things you look for, whether he's going to be a first-round pick or whether he might be a priority free agent, just in terms of, okay, this is the starting point to judge who this guy could end up being in 3 or 4 years?
Well, when Mike Renner and I have the opportunity to talk O-line, I always find myself talking about 2 things that stand out initially, and that's a player's contact balance and ability to stay on their feet, because you can't block anybody on your chest or on your ass. So the ability to stay on your feet, whether it be around a number of bodies or now more importantly, out in space, out by the numbers, out by the sideline. You see so many offensive linemen have the opportunity to go lead block out there, and then just the explosive factor. What's your explosion look like? What's your ability to sink those hips and coil up under somebody and make them feel you? The ability to take on a bull rush, because the ever-present bull rush for these people in the D-line room, they're not there because they got PhDs. They're there because, they tick a little bit slower than other people. They're going to run down your middle more often than not. And we call that running to darkness, and you want to invite that. So if you have the ability to stop the player's bull rush, it sets up well, bodes well for you everywhere in the pass protection department.
Interesting. Okay, because sometimes when you're watching a player, when I'm watching a player, you see an offensive lineman struggle with the re-anchor. So the initial bull rush gets them, and maybe they're playing too high.
Yeah.
But that's actually, if you're doing everything technically right, that's what you want as an offensive lineman to counteract whatever else comes next.
Well, balance and explosion and the ability to stop the bull rush all come into play when you watch guys find the way, like you said, the refit, the rebalance, and that's important. Recovery, I would say that's right there at 1A, 1B is recovery in this conversation, because these guys on the other side of the line of scrimmage, they're damn good too. They can threaten your edges, and every once in a while, you're not going to sit on that bull. How do you reset your feet? How do you get those cleats in the ground, your insteps, and stop that bull rush, because you got the quarterback right there behind you?
All right, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. We'll get to the list of our guys in a minute, but I have a lot of things that I personally want to know, and I think other people might find this interesting as well. So let's say you're playing left or right tackle, and you're going up against an incredibly twitchy edge rusher who like a Von Miller, for example, who consistently wins around the corner with his bend and his explosiveness, and then he mixes it up and brings you an inside counter. Like, are you just holding on for dear life? Are you going to need help? Like, how does that work? What's going through your mind when you know that this is going to be 50 snaps of a lot of work?
Well, you want to do your best to try to set up the rusher early on in the game. Obviously, your coach is going to do a good job, whether it be in the first 15 or just at the front of his mind, having an understanding that we have to threaten the play side edge of this defender. Like if a guy like Von Miller is out there, you don't want him to feel like it's just pass.
Right.
Because he's just running up the field blindly, looking to go get that bone, like a dog on a bone. What you have to do is you have to threaten him, make him feel like I'm going to reach him, make him feel like you could have a crack block coming down on the outside. And you hope that's built into the game. Now, as it pertains to when he finally does go up and underneath, you need to have that inside hand ready and available all the time. And I talk about the difference between a two-handed puncher or a striker or a grabber, whatever the hell you want to call it, and an independent hand user. And I feel like the independent hand user is exponentially more dangerous, exponentially more safe as an offensive lineman. I look at the outside hand being very important for striking and maintaining the width of the pocket. But it's the guys who don't know how to use that inside hand yet and protect their inside with their inside hand. Those are the guys I have concerns with, because the quickest way to get to a quarterback is what? Inside.
Gotcha. So, and that actually makes sense when you sort of think about it. If you're using two hands and miss with two hands, rep over. But
yeah, you got to diversify your portfolio a little bit, right?
All right. So let me ask you this question. What's tougher, a Von Miller edge rush, or maybe you're playing guard and you have to figure out an Aaron Donald situation as a pass rusher?
Well, the great thing about being a guard is you got your buddies with you to your right and to your left. And again, you have to lean on that coaching staff to be able to have the wherewithal to say, we are going to slide to 99, or we're going to have four hands on 99. But if you get the opportunity to be on the man side of a slide protection, which means, let's say the center's going left, I'm at right guard, Aaron Donald's at the 3 technique, and our center has a twitch in his eye, he can't look right, doesn't see that that's Aaron Donald, screws me over, calls Lion, calls Lou, calls whatever the hell to the left.
Yep.
Now I'm on an island with 99. My plan is get your hands on him as quickly as you can. And by hands, I mean outside hand. Threaten that guy. Put your hand in the V of his neck and have that inside hand readily available for when he does want to come inside. Because I don't care how much they weigh or how strong they are. If your left hand is tucked up with the left elbow on your rib cage, you can strike, you can capture anything that goes inside.
Okay.
As long as you have a good strike on the outside hand. Because what do we want them to do? Ideally, we want them to run by us upfield and we can just run them by. The quarterback steps up in a perfect world and has a clean dish to throw from. But that's not always going to happen with a guy like Aaron. He can run down your middle. He can probably jump over you and he can beat you inside and outside. Right. So I would say pray a lot before the game and then try to get your hands on him early.
All right, one last thing, and we'll get to this list that I'm curious about. Other than the pancake block, I would imagine, is there anything more satisfying than when a defensive lineman falls down and you just belly flop on him?
That's a good one. I would say it's not the top of the list. And for O linemen, I would say backside cutoffs on second or third level defenders are big. So obviously, play side blocks get the play started. The Eagles, they allow 4 yards before Saquon Barkley gets touched. That's the play side guys. The guys who account for the touchdowns, the home runs, are guys like Mailata or Lane Johnson on the backside, or Landon Dickerson if they can get him up off his lawnmower for a second to go get these linebackers. But if you cut those guys off, your guy can hit his head on the goalpost. That's our favorite ones, and it shows up in the film room, and guys laud that effort.
Okay, now that makes more sense. I mean, just belly flopping on a guy, I think you're just sort of like, all right, we're going to.
That's a good move. It's a classic.
But I think I think the backside. That makes a little more sense. All right. I've just wasted 5 minutes talking to Kyle about things I care about. Hopefully you guys care about it as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, producer Stryker insists we will get to these lists. We'll do that right after this.
Guys, can you feel it? Legends were born here. History was made here. These are hallowed grounds.
Hallowed grounds?
The NCIS squad room?
Well, I wasn't talking about that, but I was talking about Augusta National.
All right. It's finally time for the Masters.
I hear it's a tradition unlike any other.
All right, Kyle, let's get to this list here. Get to what the people want.
Yep.
Start with Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. And let me just get his measurables here because we'll start there. I thought he's an incredibly athletic player, 6'5", 315, 33.5-inch arms, which is plenty long for tackle, 84 and 3/8-inch wingspan. And what are your initial thoughts on Kelvin Banks? Because if he was in last year's draft class, off the top of my head, he's probably offensive lineman 5-ish, like in that range. We had Olaf Shana, we had J.C. Latham. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. We had some other guys that Joe Staley. So there was Joe Alt, excuse me.
Yeah, Joe Alt.
So there were some other guys that were probably.
He's pretty good.
He's not bad. He's 6'8" and a grown man. Some other guys that are probably ready-made to start sooner than Kelvin Banks Jr., but I thought his athleticism and the game against Michigan sticks out to me as well, where he's going up against some dudes on that defensive line who are probably going to be first-round picks, and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. So what are your initial thoughts on Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle out of Texas?
When I talked about O-lineman earlier, I was talking about balance. He has great balance. He's got great balance at the point of attack in the pass protection side of the game. I think he has really quiet outings, if you can equate it to pitching. He's just out there not really breaking a sweat. I think his athleticism stands out to me. And with all this new age offense, getting the tackles outside in space, getting the tackles on the second level, screen releases, this guy has the balance, the presence of mind and understanding to be able to be featured in an offense like that. And as you know, with a guy like a Penei Sewell, and I'm not comparing him to Penei Sewell at all, but the ability to get out in space, lead from the front with your biggest, freakiest guy, Kelvin Banks stands out to me. Yeah,
actually, I made a note that when you sometimes watch these offensive linemen and you're sometimes like, okay, this guy's going to have to move inside the next level. We have these conversations, which is not as easy as just putting that on paper. And I said, they feel like they're hanging on physically at the college level. That is not Kelvin Banks.
Yeah.
Kelvin Banks is physically exactly where you want him to be with the opportunity for upside growth. It feels like, I think he's only 21 too. So he's incredibly young.
Sign him up.
Yeah. And your number one guy, and this is one of my favorite players in this draft class. It's funny. He measured 6'3.5" at the Senior Bowl, and then he measured 6'4".
He had a good couple weeks.
At the Combine. Right tackle Armand Membou out of Missouri, 332, 33.5-inch arms, and he turns 21 next month.
Yeah, youth, explosion. Just go watch the guy run the 40-yard dash. And that's a guy who cares. Obviously they all went out there and ran, but this guy was giving it his all. I think what stands out on tape for this guy is his point of attack explosion, whether it be at or around the line of scrimmage, on double teams, back or front side. He has an understanding of where to have his hands on the hip of these defenders. A lot of people lose themselves by trying to fit their shoulder pad in there. He does a good job with his aiming points there, but I think there's not a guy that he runs into that has stonewalled him at the line of scrimmage. And that stands out to me because in the NFL, they only get bigger and stronger. And if that's a strength of yours, fantastic. We can live with that.
I could not agree more. And our buddy Pete Prisco says, I'm not sure. And if you go watch Texas A&M and South Carolina, two teams with dudes on defense who were going to be first, second, third round
it looked
picks.
like an NFL film, like watching those guys play. It was a war out there.
And Membou looked like he was calm under fire.
Yep.
Like it was fun to watch because, as you were talking about a moment ago, nothing seems too big for him. And he's very quiet in terms of the way he plays, in the sense that you're not saying, oh, he's on the ground again.
He's not overwhelmed by anything
Right.
physically. You watch freaks on the defensive line, and sometimes they get a guy coming at their legs. You get two defenders running at him. The ability to stay in balance, stay strong in all spots, that shows up on the offensive line. But unless you played it or really have an eye for it, then you wouldn't be able to see it. This guy has that strength. He's tough to knock down. He's like that thing that you punch at the boxing gym. It just pops right back up. That thing's undefeated. It's never lost. It's like the concrete wall in tennis that people practice on. That's Membou, in my opinion.
I could not agree more. And Debo and I talked to him at the Combine.
What was your impression?
Loved him because he's quite a lot of these kids. And I mean, from being an offensive lineman and being in that room for so many years, a lot of quiet confidence.
Yeah.
Some
are quiet, some aren't. But
it feels like to me, and tell me about this theory I have. It feels like offensive linemen are more quietly confident than defensive linemen who like to flap their gums, whether it's to get themselves motivated or to get into your head, or just that's how they're wired.
Well, we were all big growing up, and we were all asked to play offensive and defensive line, I would imagine.
Yeah.
A guy like Chris Jones was probably asked to play tackle at some point in his career. How do you end up on defense? You don't listen. You don't listen to the install. You don't go the right way. You don't double team when you're supposed to double team. So they put you on a defensive line. They just say, you see that little brown ball? Go get it. And you guys can talk smack the whole time. And when you get tired, you tap your helmet and Johnny will come get you.
There's no tapping out.
That's what the defensive line. Well, you can do it at quarterback now too in the National Football League. We saw Anthony Richardson come out. He was a little tired.
Come on, AR5. Can't
but the O linemen, they don't do that. And like you said, quiet confidence. It's the confidence in the preparation that they've done, because not only are these O linemen lifting with the team, but now they're doing position-specific strength training with one another, the camaraderie in that room. And, we were talking in the hallway about this. It's the largest group of players on the field in terms of size and numbers. That means something. We lead, and quiet confidence is probably the best way to put it.
And here's the thing. When we talked to him, he took issue. And when I said to him, I said, if team's talking about being 6'3", is that too short for right tackle? And he sort of rolled his eyes.
He said, I'm 6'4". Did you see the combine?
He's 6'4". He grew. But he has 34.5-inch arms.
Yep.
And he said, and the funny thing is, we talked to two of the Texas A&M edge rushers during the combine as well. And they both said independently that he was the toughest guy they faced. And I said to them, he was 6'3"? I said, no, we didn't.
No, his arms weren't 6'3".
Right. And that's the point. And talk to me about that, because you mentioned before we did the podcast about arm length, and we could talk about Peter Skoronski, Will Campbell, that have shorter arms.
Yeah, Will Campbell.
And then wingspan. because Peter Skoronski played left tackle at Northwestern, was drafted by the Tennessee Titans 2 years ago, moved inside the left guard, and was really good. Had the appendectomy, but he was really good up until that point. And what's the difference? What are teams looking for? Because I talked to, this is going back years now, Dante Scarnecchia, the world famous defensive, the offensive
I
line
shudder
coach.
when I hear that name a little bit.
Did you work with him?
Well, we had a joint practice against the New England Patriots in 2015 under John Fox's administration. And we were up there at their practice facility. What a fantastic spot that is, by the way. And they have a hill built behind their practice field where the entirety of the Patriots organization, staff included, they run this hill after practice as a show of dominance, kind of like,
I gotcha.
yips and whoops, type of deal. And you walk off defeated after practice. Well, we ran it with those guys. And then we ended up doing some of the drills that Dante Scarnecchia, the legend, had put out for his offensive lineman. I could barely make it through the drill.
Okay.
So I have a lot of respect for the guys that played O-line under Scar. Because what a total badass. Even some of the drills that they had him doing.
I was very privileged that he even sat down to talk with me. This was at the Super Bowl years ago when the Patriots were still dominating. And I asked him about short arms because Jonah Williams, the left tackle at Alabama, was coming out. And that was one of the things, quote unquote, he struggled with. So this is the 2019 draft. And he said, short arms don't necessarily matter because if you have 38-inch arms and you're like this,
Yep.
you have
timing. So timing, understanding of leverage, and weight of your hands. So the ability to loosely strike something, like, you watch those guys, those kung fu dudes, they're not up there, they're not bench pressing guys off them, they're snapping that hand in there, bang, taking away spots, creating space. The arm length conversation to me comes down to how do you use it? It really is a motion in the ocean conversation because some of these offensive tackles, some of these offensive guards have an understanding that independent hand usage creates more length for you than just striking with two hands. So in the classic sense of arm length, it does matter because those guys used to block right here, two hands out in front of their face. Now you see offensive linemen striking with one hand, leaving one hand to come in combination with, or to just be left aside for, that patient inside security blanket. I heard Mike Tyson on a podcast crying one time saying that he got hit 3 times and it sounded like one punch. He was like, it sounded like one punch. He kept saying he was crying. That's what you're trying to do, those defensive linemen. You want to come with a flurry, a combination, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or it's bang, bang, or it's flash, bang. You're going to get them eventually, but you're longer with one arm.
Right.
I can reach out to here with one arm. I can reach to right here with two arms.
Gotcha.
That's a lot of inches. Write that in the scouting profile too. Like how they use their hands.
Absolutely. So I'm talking about that. Let's go to my number 3 guy. By the way, my number 2 guy was Membou. Your number 2 guy was Kelvin Banks Jr. So we're on the same page there. 1 and 2. At 3, I had Will Campbell just ahead of who you have at number 3, Tyler Booker. We'll talk about both those guys, and then we'll take a quick break here. But let's start with Will Campbell. The first thing, the arm length, 32.5 inches. We can talk about that. It's played left tackle. My thing is this, and you can talk to how easy or hard it is to move someone from tackle to guard because you can say it, but if you've never played guard before, you've never played guard before. And number 2, does Will Campbell play insanely upright more so than other offensive tackles? And what is that about?
He is upright, but there's a happy balance between a guy being too crouched and over his toes. You get your head over your toe. As your head goes, you go. So if your head's over your toes, if you're crouched down, you can get push-pulled really easily.
Right.
If you're upright, you don't have the ability to get push-pulled. Now, you take a look at this picture of Will Campbell here. Beautiful uniform, by the way.
Yeah, that's
LSU. Well done. I'll say that. And that's correct body posture, in my opinion. There was a lot of times where coaches told me to get my pad level down, but I'm cut low. I have really short legs and a long upper body. So I look at a guy like Will Campbell, and his torso is pretty long, so it appears as if he's more upright more often than not than he probably really is. One thing that stands out to me about this guy, his ability to get out of a jam, his ability to recover when his edges are threatened or when his sternum is exposed and somebody gets up under his pads.
Right.
I wrote down Gumby in his scouting profile because he just finds a way. He's got those baby deer legs. They just can bend in ways that you're not supposed to bend. And he finds a way to recover regain that contact balance and get guys blocked. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to be a tackle day one or if he'll have the opportunity to be an all-pro guard day one.
Yeah.
But I'll say this about the transition from tackle to guard, because I made it. It gets on you a lot quicker. So
Right.
you better come right. You better come correct with those hands, or it's going to be trial by fire in training camp. And I have no doubt that he's going to figure it out, but it is tough. It's just as tough as going from guard to tackle. People say, well, this guy's a guard. He can never play tackle.
Yeah.
Well, I invite those tackles to come into the phone booth
Right.
and try it on for size, because it's no fun. I've talked to a lot of guys who have tried it later in their careers, and they're like, I don't know how you did this for 7 years, 8 years.
And the funny thing is, Donovan Jackson, who we're not going to talk about.
He's right. He's just off the list.
Yeah. And we'll actually mention him in later in the show. I'm looking down the list here. He made the move from left guard to left tackle when their left tackle got hurt at Ohio State.
Dominant.
His first matchup was against Abdul Carter, and he's like, yeah, that didn't go so great. But after that, I got it together, and it was incredibly impressive to the point where teams are actually wondering if we're going to get a 2-for-1 here. Let's talk about your guy, number 3. He's one of the best football players in this draft class, Tyler Booker. The guard from Alabama. Debo and I talked with him as well at the combine. The nicest kid in the world. Yeah. Incredibly humble, smart, hard worker. And I talked to people down in Alabama. They were like, this guy was the team leader by the time last season didn't go exactly how Alabama wanted to, but everyone was looking to him for leadership, and he was the guy who provided it. And if you told me he went in the top 10, I'd be like, sign me up.
So the thing that stands out to me outside of the traits where we talked about balance and explosion and all that stuff, the eyeball test. And on film, this guy, Tyler Booker, looks to be about 6'2", 320. Yeah. But in reality, what are his measurables?
6'4.5", 321. You've done this before. Oh, let's see. 34.5-inch arms, 83.5-inch wingspan.
When you say 340, when you say he's 340?
Yeah. Oh, all day.
So he looks 315, 320. He plays 350 in terms of his density, his line of scrimmage ability to just roll people out. Like my dad used to tell me, like, you're going to show up. He would pump me up 4 games like a wave hitting the beach. You are inevitable. Sir. You are inevitable. This guy right here is inevitable. The way he finishes people. There was a play, I think it was against Ole Miss, maybe. He finished a linebacker, pancaked him brutally. They ended up helmet to helmet, and then he did a front somersault, and then he landed on his feet. And I just shut the tape off. And I said, the next time I watch tape of this guy, he's going to be doing things like this to people in the National Football League. I love him. He's built for battle in terms of his density. He's just a square. He's a door frame. And he loves to finish people. Point of attack explosiveness is awesome as well.
So we saw an image, if you're listening to the podcast, of him in pass protection with Jalen Miller behind him. It looked like the Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram photo, standing in midfield, like you're taking your kid to get ice cream.
Photoshop.
That's how big Tyler Booker is. So I don't give a crap, but I'll just bring it up. He ran a 5.38, and some of his footwork drills weren't great. I do not care. Like, those are things that I will just dismiss.
Yep.
Think about him as a football player.
Well, it's like most of the time I look at RAS scores, which I love. I was a big RAS guy. Okay. I've played with guys who were absolute shit at football that had great RAS scores.
Relative athletic score, sort of compare athletically with.
Yeah, it's a good way to find out how explosive a guy is, the ability to move, all that kind of stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. But football is different. There's a reason Puka Nacua was football fast, as Sean McVay and Les Snead put it, as opposed to stopwatch fast. Well, some of these guys, and I think about a guy like Eddie Goldman that I played with that got like a 2.8 on the RAS score because he could barely tie his effing shoes. But you go out there and he can sit on a double team and win you reps. So regardless of Tyler Booker's RAS score or whatever kind of measurable you want to reference, go put the film on. This guy loves playing football. It's obvious, and he wins quietly at the line of scrimmage.
Don't overthink it is what I would say. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back here, we'll hit me and Kyle's 4 and 5 in our top 5 here on this offensive line with the first pick, and we'll talk about that right after this.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
All right, Kyle, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you were watching, we just saw a commercial for the Masters on CBS. But I want to talk about another sport where you have to be worth millions to be good at: tennis.
Yes.
And it's funny, you come to tennis in your post-football career, but you think there's a corollary between tennis and being a good offensive lineman, which is a theory I've never heard.
Well, I think tennis has a lot of overlap with offensive line, because even though you're playing with 4 other guys as an offensive lineman, you're out there having a game against your competitor. You're lined up directly across from somebody who's going to hit you with a flurry of moves over the course of 65 to 95 plays. And in tennis, it's no different. There's, however many points, 100 or something, to get to a win. But I found in playing tennis that you get the same kind of explosive cardio, the same type of lateral movement, the same type of trying to generate force through the ground that you were trying to tap into as an offensive lineman. Now, if I stand straight up and hit a tennis ball, and try to be smooth with it, I'll get it across the net. It'll have a little top spin. It might even get in and play. But if I play with a good base, if I've got my feet in the ground and I strike the ball, it makes that tennis ball noise that you know all so well. And that thing explodes off the racket. It's the same thing with your hands. It's the same thing with defenders. If you can find a way to generate force through the ground, transfer it through your body.
I'm a terrible tennis player, but one of the things I remember when I was trying to play in my 20s and routinely getting smoked is that, in addition to what you're talking about in terms of hitting the ball, if your first step is terrible in terms of trying to hit a return, it's point over. Like, you have to make sure your footwork is on point in the return game as well.
Yeah, I mean, first step is everything, right? And as an offensive lineman, the ability to get out of your stance, which is why we preach stance so much. And not only do you have to have a good stance, but you have to do that stance every play. And you can't have tells for what you're going to do. And the ability to get out of said stance is equally or more important than what your stance looks like. Take a guy like Lane Johnson, for example, at the right tackle position. One of the best to ever do it. He's going to walk into Canton, even if he walked out of the locker room today. His ability to create distance between the line of scrimmage and his point of conflict is like nobody else in the National Football League. His ability to get out of his stance and get to his point where he's going to fight his fight inside out. That is what makes him such a great player. And you combine that with his ability to recover, obviously his football intelligence and his will to win. And a guy like that's unstoppable. Yeah,
that's right. And those guys are, while some people, fans, media, NFL front office think those guys grow on trees, turns out.
Yeah, they don't. They are trees.
Nice. All right, let's talk about my number 4 guy is Tyler Booker. Excuse me. We just talked about him, but I want to talk about sort of going down the Lane Johnson path of athleticism, edge, angry football player. Josh Simmons, a left tackle out of Ohio State, got injured early in the Oregon game, which I think was in October. That precipitated Donovan Jackson, who we just talked about, moving out to left tackle and doing a fantastic, splendid job. But another young man that we talked to at the combine, Josh Simmons, and he had an edge to him. And it's varying degrees of edge. Like, Will Campbell was a nice kid from Louisiana. Josh Simmons was a guy that felt like he had a lot to prove, even though he came in at almost 6'5", 317, 33-inch arms, 82-inch wingspan, if you're curious at home. And he didn't play against a lot of high-level Ohio State competition, and he transferred from San Diego State. So that wasn't Power 5 or now Power 4 competition. And the thing that I asked him, I said, why did you leave San Diego State? And he essentially said, because I accomplished everything I needed to accomplish there, and I needed to play against better players. And I appreciated his honesty. But after talking to him, and I've been accused of falling in love with these guys, I was like, okay, this guy, I would take him in the first round, even though he's coming back from a pretty serious knee injury. What do you like about Josh Simmons?
I love what you just said. And I had no idea what he had said about San Diego State. I knew he made a stop there. But as a guy who played in junior college and had to go through 2 years of not only trying to find myself as a football player, but as a competitor, you eventually figure out a lot of the technique. You love the game, obviously, and you start to dominate people. And you don't want to get that false sense of security, that false sense of confidence to where you can do a 75% effort on this rep and get the guy blocked. I wanted to play against the best. It was clear to me that Josh Simmons wanted the same thing. And this, to me, to your point, it seems like a real no-brainer, because in the film that he does have out there for the Buckeyes, he looks really, really good, really, really athletic, really, really effortless.
Yes.
And you get a guy like that, he's only going to get better, because surely now, after spending time at Ohio State, he's kind of got that same feeling as he did at San Diego State, where he's like, there's got to be better players. Well, young man, they're right around the corner. You're going to have every opportunity. So if you have a need at the tackle position, I would say 100% take a swing on this guy. Those injuries don't last forever.
no concern to then about hit an ACL and then maybe a kneecap. I don't remember the specific. Any concerns about the injury in terms of long-term success?
Dude, the rehab programs are so amazing now, and he has so much football ahead of him. I'm just looking forward to see him go dominate.
I'm with you on that. And again, you get a sense of a person. You don't know who they are, but in a 15-minute conversation, whether they're serious or hardcore, and I got both serious and hardcore and talking to Josh Simmons, like he wasn't ha-ha.
He's got an edge. I've heard that.
Yeah, it felt like it.
Which I like.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They can't all be Will Campbells.
They all can't be Will Campbells.
You know, every room's got their personality traits, their archetypes within the room. And it's important to have a good blend of that.
Yeah.
And you know what? You go to Kansas City and there's the field general is Creed Humphrey, and a guy like Trey Smith is the enforcer, and they had Joe Tooney, who was their Doctor Strange, like figure any problem out. And then the tackles, we're going to figure out how to make them work. Every O-line has that. So figure out which one needs Josh Simmons the most and pull the trigger.
Yeah. I mean, again, I keep saying this, don't overthink it. Josh Simmons was line number 5, and your number 5 was line number 3.
Yep.
Campbell at LSU. We've talked a little bit about him earlier. And I'll just ask you this. Is that a situation where you're going to draft him and just play him at tackle and figure it out? Because a lot of times when you talk to teams, we'll say, okay, we'll see what OTAs and the training camp looks like and we'll make a decision. Or do you going to have, I guess it depends on your roster, but would you consider him a tackle first, I guess?
That's a really tough question. I'm glad it's not my job.
Okay.
I look at it as I'm an old offensive lineman maybe in the room. And if he comes in and tries to play tackle and this happens, what is my next conversation with him?
Right.
If he comes in as a guard and has complaints about the fact that he's a tackle, what are the conversational points you're going to have with this young man to keep him on the right track? Because we all know how important that rookie year is, getting not only first impressions from external eyeballs, but within house. You know, that's important, how you handle these situations. And from everything I've heard and listening to him talk, I really appreciate his viewpoint on the game of football. And I think he won't bat an eye at anything anybody asks him to do. He's just an offensive lineman. He wants to go whip somebody's ass.
I think that's right. And he was pretty soft-spoken and not very committed. Like you ask questions like, okay, he was one of the toughest guys you face. He goes, oh, they were all tough. I was like, all right. Yeah. So fair enough. And he's just like, he's got like that 12-year NFL veteran thing going. Absolutely.
You know, as a young man.
Striker, we can recap the top 5. I'll ask Kyle this question while we do that, because I think Striker has a graphic for it. But in terms of any of these young men, what can they expect year one as rookies? And we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast, and how their life is going to be completely different professionally than it was in college. And just in terms of the length of the season, the expectations, this is your job now, so you don't have to go to class. Your hours will not be cut short because of NCAA rules. So what's the best advice you could give a 21, 22-year-old year one offensive lineman in terms of how to make it to January?
Find someone who has what you want and do what they do.
That's great advice.
And it doesn't have to be somebody in your position group. Find somebody who's probably going to be there next year and the year after that. And I would say that so that your one lighthouse, your point of reference doesn't up and leave you after your rookie year. I think that's really important. For me, it was Matt Forte when I came in the National Football League. And the way that he carried himself, the way that he ate his breakfast, the way that he lifted weights, the way that he treated everybody. You know, that stuff's really important, man. And as important as getting the 3 technique rolled off the ball with your backside tackle on a B block, it's also important to say hello to the nice lady at the front desk
100%.
And make sure to have time for the gentlemen who are cooking your food.
Absolutely.
That stuff, you know, good things tend to happen, you know, if you're doing that stuff right. But obviously go kick somebody's ass on the football field. But you find the biggest guy and kick their ass. Don't fight them. Go beat them. And when somebody says we need somebody to get up here for the one-on-ones, you should pull a freaking hamstring, run into the front of that line to prove to not only yourself, but your teammates, the people that drafted you, that invested in you, that you are this guy. Now, heavy lies the head that wears the crown. If you want to be that guy that shows up day one and whip ass, now you got to do it for the next 10 years.
But that's a good point, because you want your teammates and your bosses to know that they can count on you when things get heavy.
Yep.
And that's interesting. And
because for 31 teams, they do.
That's right. That's right. And the other point you made might even be more important in terms of how you treat people. Until my kids are substantially older than yours. I have an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old. And my first rule is don't be a dick. Just be a good person. And then, yes, 18-year-old, your grades aren't where they need to be, but at least you're a good person. And we'll have that conversation later. Hey, Striker, we want to take a quick break before we go to the final block, or we want to keep going? All right, let's do 6 through 10. And let's see what we got here. So you want to talk about my guy, Gray Zabel. I love me some Gray Zabel. And I'm going to tell you a Gray Zabel story from the Senior Bowl that sort of touches with what you just talked about in terms of who you are as a person. So one of the most memorable Senior Bowl moments in recent years is Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, running through Josh Connerly, who was playing right tackle in one-on-one drills from Oregon in the one, and just pancaked him. And I went back and watched it on the practice tape. I just wanted to see what everyone else was doing. And Gray Zabel, and I asked Gray about this at the combine, when Gray Zabel saw Josh Connerly, who was his teammate that week, on his ass, he immediately went over to Josh to help him up while everyone else was hooping and hollering, going crazy, and understandably so. And in Josh's defense, he's a left tackle. He was asked to play right tackle in those one-on-ones. And the one-on-ones.
We know how those things go at the Senior Bowl.
And the one-on-ones, as you might agree, they favored defensive.
It's a D-line drill. It's a confidence builder drill. That's what we used to like to call it. They'd be like, all right, one-on-ones, field 2. And we'd be like, we got to build the confidence in these idiots over there. We got to make them feel good.
So I said to Gray at the combine, and he has a fantastic mustache in person as well. I said, so what were you thinking when I saw you walk over there to help him up? He says, look, man, everyone's been there where they've gotten beaten, and I'm there to help my teammates up, and that's exactly what I did. And when you talk to teams, they say that he is going to be a team captain year one. Like, that's the type of dude he is in the
I
locker
love
room.
this guy.
And left tackle at North Dakota State last season, he's going to kick inside and play guard or center, either one, and he's going to be dominant. He dominated the entire week of Senior Bowl. So tell me what you like about Gray.
Well, you know, in every Western movie you watch, there's a bunch of hard men at a watering hole or something like that. And sometimes there comes a crossroads in the movie or the show, and you find out something about one of these tough men that's a soft side of them. And it's an endearing, it's an endearing scene. What you just told me about this guy, Gray Zabel, going to help out Josh Connerly, that speaks volumes about who you are, because everybody's there at the Senior Bowl to show what they can do.
Right.
This is about me. This is, you know, if ever there was a time where it's like, this is all about what you can do, it's the Senior Bowl. So if somebody goes and gets embarrassed like that, or you know, forklifted at the line of scrimmage, you go help them up. That's what being a teammate's about. I love that this guy played at North Dakota State. I love that this guy, like so many others we've seen in recent history, have so many doubters based on the jersey that he wore in college, not based on the film that he put out at the Senior Bowl, whether it's tackle, guard, or center. He was out there just wearing people out.
Yep.
I love his intensity. The guy plays like he's redlining his car at all times, and I love that about him. The mustache is a great touch.
Yep.
And the name seems like it was something that was like, it sounds like a Wingdings font or something like that. Gray Zabel. It's hard, you know, say
He
it
sounded like a Western guy to me, like a cowboy.
5 times fast. Yeah, I mean, he is a cowboy. I can't wait to watch him play in the National Football League. He's going to be a room favorite in whatever room he's in.
Right, exactly.
You know, white guy shows up with a mustache, and he's actually worth his weight in salt or whatever the hell they say.
Yeah.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah.
We're gonna roll with this guy. It's like I think about Quinn Miners in Denver. Crowd favorite, fan favorite, absolutely an O-line room favorite. I hear he lifts more weight, pushes more sleds, does all this stuff than anybody. That's the kind of guy you're going to get with Zabel, and I think that's awesome. And he can play ball, any position.
And that's the beauty of Gray Zabel. He seems like a great person, number one, and the versatility he brings on game day. I'll just mention the names if you're listening. Arante Ursary, the tackle out of Minnesota, enormous. He's going to get drafted pretty high. Donovan Jackson, you can see the list here if you're watching. We talked about him earlier. Tate Ratledge, great hair, great mullet, also a great mustache. And a lot of people haven't talked about Ratledge during this process. If he goes in the second round, I will not be surprised. And then Marcus Membou out of Purdue is also a tackle who's going to get drafted pretty early. And before we get out of here, Kyle, I'm going to mention my guy Charles Grant Jr. because I'm a William Mary alum.
Yep.
And
Go Tribe.
You and Mike talked about him on Pushing the Pile. One of the things I heard about him and talking to some teams is that he's too nice. Like, he's a smart kid. He had an opportunity for academic scholarship to William Mary. Any concerns about being too nice as an offensive lineman in particular?
Wasn't DeBrickashaw Ferguson like the nicest guy in the world?
And that is the comp his coach, who coached DeBrickashaw at UVA, gave Charles Grant Jr.
Wasn't Andy? Was Ron Prince who was the O-line coach for DeBrickashaw at UVA?
I'm not sure.
There was Andy Heck was the coach at UVA for a long time, and he had a lot of NFL players. I'm not sure. It might have been Ron Prince that coached him there, and I trust Ron Prince. He's seen a lot of all pros come through the doors at UVA and stuff like that. But Charles Grant, his athleticism, it's something that an O-line coach might walk up to him at the beginning of the day and say, "Did you thank him yet?" And Charles may respond, "For what? Who?" And the coach may say, "Mom, Dad, and God."
Amen.
Because you've been touched, young man. And I know football is very new for him.
Yes.
And they may say he's too nice now, but the more football he plays, I can promise you he's not getting any
So you're not
nicer.
worried about that.
He's not getting any nicer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go put your hands on people. Tell them good rep. Say good rush. That really pisses guys off. When you block them, you get to feel their glute on the old slap, the butt slap, send them back to where they're going. And you say good rush. That's what Charles Grant's going to be doing. It's going to be quiet. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch him get better and better every year.
I think so.
You draft a guy like that, you have the understanding that he hasn't been playing SEC football for the last 4 years. So take your chance on him. Trust your staff that you pay to get him right. Trust the other guys you've invested in the offensive line room and get him rolling.
Absolutely. Didn't start playing football till junior high school. Was 240 when he got to college.
I was a sophomore starter in high school, so I can relate to Charles
There you go.
Grant. And there was nothing that I couldn't do on the field athletically.
Yes.
And it made my life a lot easier as I was learning and figuring out who the hell the mic was or what a lion call is or who we going to on Roger. That stuff comes with time. And Charles Grant, he went to William & Mary. He's not a dummy.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy.
I'm one of the dummies that did go to William & Mary. Charles Grant is not me. He's a smart young man, so I'm excited for him. That's it.
That was
Kyle,
fun.
this was awesome, man. Kyle Long joining us here on With the First Pick talking offensive lineman, and we'll be, by the way, 29 days until the NFL draft. So
wow.
Mark your calendar. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.